Mohican people who are the stewards of this land. Today, the community resides in Wisconsin and is known as the Stockbridge-Munsee Mohican Nation. We pay honor and respect to their ancestors, past and present. Voices present speakers on timely and enduring issues each semester to broaden and enrich the scope of studies at Hudson Valley Community College. Please fill out a survey at the link on our first slide. These help to inform our future programming. Today, Voices presents Bridie Farrell, a three-time American record-holding speed skater who is the founder of the nonprofit America Loves Kids. Bridie is an advocate on behalf of survivors of childhood sexual abuse and exploitation. She's a frequent commentator in the media and a distinguished speaker about issues related to child abuse. Please welcome Bridie Farrell.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Take off my PPE. All right. Again, thank you so much for having me today. And first, I want to lead off with Happy Veterans Day to all our veterans out there. My name is Bridie Farrell, and as you may now know, I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse that arose in the context of my participation in the Olympic speed skating movement. The man who abused me when I was 15 was my 33-year-old teammate, who at the time was the #1 ranked speed skater in the whole country. And I was an aspiring Olympian myself. I grew up in Saratoga Springs. But I was young and impressionable and influenced by his stature in the sport. So when he began to show an interest in me, began to groom my family, and began the process of exercising power over me, I was neither old enough nor really mature enough to comprehend what was happening to me. Gable abused me for months and months, and to this day, it's had lasting impact on me, I'd say physically, psychologically, and mentally. And as strange as this sounds, I actually have a good story. More on that in a moment. Because sadly, in this country, 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys are sexually abused before the age 18. That's 25% of girls and 17% of boys in the United States. And a vast majority of abuse survivors, they simply have nowhere to turn. If you're a substance abuser, you can find help. If you're an alcoholic, you can find help. But if you are sexually abused, it's not easy to walk in someplace and say, hey, I was molested by my uncle, or I was molested in Boy Scouts. And that's why my story is almost a good one. I come from an upper middle class home. I have had and have very attentive parents. I had all the education and opportunity I could find. All of the things that are supposed to prevent horrible things from happening to a child. And while I had an addiction, just like some do to drugs and alcohol, mine is one society considered valuable. I was an athlete, a really good one. I had 3 American records. So my addiction, skating fast in circles, was celebrated. And even still, it was incredibly hard for me to come forward with my story. Just imagine what it's like for a child to come forward, or someone who's been abused within their own family. Just imagine it. And this is the great irony of it all. People tell me how brave I am to have told my story in my 30s. If I'm brave at 31 to come forward, try and think what it would be like for a 12-year-old. A child like that to speak up about something that is happening to them, they can't. They don't even really know what's happening to them or comprehend what's happening to them. So this is actually what inspired me to come forward with my story. After I retired from speed skating, I went into real life. I got my degree at Cornell. I moved to New York City, got a job in insurance, and was just leading a normal life. But truthfully, I was not very happy. I was, by every definition, woefully depressed, and I was so depressed it was even seriously contemplating suicide. So I asked myself, when was the last time I was happy? And it was when I was competing as an athlete. I decided at age 30 to make a comeback. And when I walked into the rink, it was just the same thing. Banners of my abuser hanging from the rafters as a great champion. Pictures of him in the Hall of Fame. His name planted everywhere as the former president of USA Speed Skating. At the same time, I saw a little girl named Claire, who was about the same age I was when I started skating. And she would be skating around in the rink. Sometimes she would follow me around. And I realized right then and there that things had to change. I could not let what happened to me happen to Claire. So I came forward with my story on National Public Radio. And the next day, my abuser, Gable, admitted it, that he had, quote, an inappropriate relationship with an underage speed skater, end quote. He went on to apologize and express regret. It sent shockwaves through the sport that I loved. But a week after I came forward, another female speed skater publicly disclosed that Andy had raped her when she was a child. And it later became clear that neither she nor I were his first victims. And in fact, I was his fifth. Gable and I should have never met. Had speed skating or the United States Olympic Committee been doing their jobs, that man should not have been allowed to work and compete with and even supervise children. But while I had spoken up about my abuse, and it felt like an important first step, I had no legal recourse to pursue against Andy or against the institutions that covered up the abuse. And I couldn't pursue anything in the state where I was abused, which was New York. And that's when I realized that I had to do something about it. Survivors of child sexual abuse often don't come forward for many, many years. Mostly, average show that people do not speak about child sexual abuse until their 40s or 50s. And it's true for a variety of reasons, but we certainly have the data now to show and prove that. As a result, survivors of child sexual abuse are a class of individuals who have no access to the US justice system. Literally, an entire class of people, as much as 25% of women and 17% of men, who are barred from access to the justice system by a crime that was committed against them as children. So I decided to go about changing the law in New York, to open a retroactive civil window that would allow survivors to revive their time-barred claims against their abusers and the institutions that covered it up. It was about 7 years. It was a 7-year slog with lots of fighting and arguing, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about politics, mostly that politics is very, very political. But at the end of the day, we got it done. Last year, thanks to Senator Brad Hoylman and Assemblywoman Linda Rosenthal, we got it done. We passed the Child Victims Act. Governor Cuomo signed the bill into law, and then this year, during the COVID pandemic, we were able to pass another bill that extended it for 1 year. And so Governor Cuomo signed a year extension to permit survivors to come forward until August 2021. This is the beginning of the story about how we turned what is sometimes a sad or difficult story into one of triumph and inspiration. We literally changed a law and changed lives. But also, sort of amazingly, I am one of the few Americans who can honestly say that I'm taking advantage of a law I personally got passed by recently filing my own case. But I didn't stop there. I realized that as much as this was important to me, I needed to take it across the country. So I transformed the nonprofit I formed in New York to work on the New York legislation called New York Loves Kids into America Loves Kids, and I took it national. And that's really when it dawned on me that this could be a national movement, which we can all be involved in to help protect children. I went out to Arizona, a totally red state, and a hard fight out there, but we got the bill passed as well. In Arizona, we proved this is not a partisan issue. We then came back and passed a bill in New Jersey, only to go back out west and pass a bill in California. From west to east and east to west, we have begun to get some results and success. And that's because things have changed. Things have changed in society since I came forward and first spoke about what happened to me when Claire motivated me to speak up. We've had we've had Me Too, we've had Epstein, we've had Weinstein. All of these contribute to people feeling more empowered to come forward and speak their truth. And it's helped us to create a national movement, one in which I invite everyone that is watching, near, far, and everywhere in between, to also get involved in. So that's my full story from start to finish. And what I'd like to do now is just talk a little bit about the specifics of passing a bill in New York State. Since we are Hudson Valley and we are right next to Albany, I thought that would be a fitting thing to talk about. So I thought that when I was called to come help with a bill in Albany, that telling my story would be enough. That sitting across from legislators and telling them that I'm from Saratoga, I was abused in Saratoga, I was abused in Lake Placid, that things like this would move them enough to speak, to support us and support our bill. And like I said earlier, I learned that politics is very, very political. People would look me in the eye and they'd say, I'm sorry about what happened to you, Bridie, but it doesn't happen in our district. And the stat of 1 out of 4 girls and 1 out of 6 boys was something that people just wouldn't recognize, didn't want to recognize. I mean, I'm one of 6 kids. There's 4 girls and 2 boys in my family. 1 in 4 girls, I'm that stat. So what we did, finally, when we said things really need to change here in Albany, we need to make a wave and make action for something to happen. It was right around the time of the 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. Do you remember the movie? So what we did was we took, in the movie, there's the orange billboards, and it said, raped while dying and still no arrest, how come Chief Willoughby? So we took that idea, we took that concept, and we rented U-Haul trucks. We parked them outside of the state capitol in Albany, and we said, 87% of New Yorkers support the Child Victims Act and still no vote. How come Senator Flanagan? I mean, it was the same orange pixel code, it was the same font. I made sure that it was all buttoned up like that. And we drove those U-Haul trucks to the Capitol and parked outside at 6:58 to make sure we got the prime parking spot, which is oddly hard to find in February in Albany, but it was true. So we're parked right outside there, right outside the legislative office building. And then we went through meetings that day, met with legislators all day long. We were in a meeting with a staffer of a senator who, the staffer sat there at the head of the table. I was at the table, and I could think of 2 survivors and 3 advocate groups from all over the state were at this table. And the staffer said, listen, my wife's a survivor. I get it. I get the lasting impacts, but at the end of the day, my boss is not going to sign this legislation. It's not going to pass us. So thank you for your time. We'll see you again next year. And we all got up to leave, and he said, Bridie, come here. So I go over, I said, yes. We go over to his window, and we're looking down at the street there in Albany, and he says, well, how'd you do these trucks? And I said, first off, how do you know that was me? And he said, come on, we know it was you. And he's like, they're causing a big problem. Everyone who's opposed to your bill is talking about these trucks, and it's causing a big problem. And then he said, don't stop. Don't stop. Take this message all across the state. You can't stop. So what we did was we slept on it, and we decided, well, we'll rent an RV. We'll take the signs, plaster it to the side of the RV, and that started our journey across the state from Brooklyn, Long Island, out to Buffalo, up to the Adirondacks. And every time we crossed into a new district, we pulled this thing over and changed the senator's name. We just called them out, and we said, whatever you think about the bill, whether you want to vote for it or against it, at least let's just have a vote. At least let's just let democracy do its thing. And so we drove this RV all over the state, and one of my most impactful moments of the whole trip was we were in Geneva, New York, on the tiny little main street that's there. And truth be told, the RV, you have to watch a VHS tape on how to work an RV. And I clearly missed the part where it explains how the heat works. So it's February, there's no heat in this thing. And so we brought my dog, which was the only source of warmth overnight. So we're in Geneva, I take the dog out. My colleague Amelia is with me, and she's sitting in the RV, and someone walks up to her and says, what's this, the Child Victims Act? And so Amelia says, well, it's this bill that we're passing in New York to allow survivors an opportunity whose statute has expired for them to come forward and file a suit. And he's like, well, that sounds obvious. Why isn't that passed? And Amelia said, well, a lot of legislators just don't think it's in their district. And I kid you not, he said, well, I was abused as a kid. Do you want to video my story? And so Amelia said, sure. So she gets out, and she's videoing Jim from Geneva with, just think about it, that orange sign from 3 billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri behind him. And she's filming him, and he's telling her about some of the worst moments of his life on the side of the street. And along walks his friend, and his friend says, Jim, what are you doing? And he looks at him, and he says, well, actually, Jose, I was sexually abused as a kid, and these people are trying to change a law, and so I shared my story. And what did Jose say? Me too. And he told his story. In the amount of time I walked my dog, parked on the side of the street in this tiny little town in New York, 2 men came forward and told their story. And our RV was truly parked directly across the street from the senator at the time, who did not support our bill. And so it was that true grassroots movement that I think, one, let the legislators know we're not going away, and 2, let them know we're very, very serious. Another thing we did with the RV was we went to Rochester. And as I mentioned earlier, I went to Cornell, so that means I lived in Ithaca, so I'm a huge fan of Wegmans. So we drove the RV to Wegmans, and we're sitting in the Wegmans parking lot, and we were actually kicked out of the parking lot because they said that there's no advertising permitted in the lot. They can't have billboards. And I said, these are not billboards, these are really big bumper stickers. They disagreed, and they sent us out. We went everywhere, relentlessly. Meanwhile, what we did on top of this is we had little town meetings when we went across the state, and we had postcard packets for people. And it was 3 postcards, the same as the RV. It was 3 orange postcards, and you would write, their first one would say, 86% of New Yorkers support the Child Victims Act. The second one would say, and still no vote. And the third one would say, how come, Senator? And we would fill it in. And we got constituents local people to fill them in, to write their senator's name on it, to sign the back of it. These senators know these people. They see them at the church on the weekend. They see them at the synagogue on the weekend. They see them at the baseball field. These are people in their community, and they stood up, and collectively we said this law has to change. And so people also always wonder, who would oppose such a law? Who would oppose a law to help children, right? And in New York State, we had three main opponents. The first was the Roman Catholic Church, the second was the ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, and the third was the Boy Scouts of America. These are three institutions that have a large youth-serving population. And so there was more incentive for these institutions to cover up and suppress what happened than to address the issue. With that, the Boy Scouts recently declared bankruptcy. And anyone who was abused in Boy Scouts has only until next week, actually, to file a claim on behalf of their abuse. If you want more information on that, feel free to email me, bridie@bridiefarrell.com. Happy to help anyone. But the thing is, with these, listing out these three institutions, there's another institution that comes to people's mind if you just quickly look back over the last year or two, and that's gymnastics and the Olympic Committee, right? How many of those girls said, what's happening with Dr. Nasser's not right? And how many times did they look the other way? How many times did the board not listen? How many times did Steve Penny, the CEO, not listen? How many times did Scott Blackman, the CEO of the Olympic Committee, pretend not to hear? A lot. Kind of the same as it was for me in speed skating. But you know what? If I have kids, I don't have kids now, but if I have kids, I would put them in speed skating. I would. Not just because skating in circles at freezing cold ice rinks, inevitably at terrible hours of the day, is the best thing in the world, but it's brought so much good to my life, speed skating did. I think my ability to stand up in front of crowds and speak probably comes from my ability to having to perform on the ice in front of crowds. I know my ability to love and to trust men today is also from the experiences I had through speed skating. Don't get me wrong, the crimes that were committed against me have left harm that cannot be undone. But that does not mean that the whole thing was bad. It's the experiences with safe and trusting men over the years that said, not all guys are gonna do this to me. I can trust someone. It's those experiences that allowed me to grow who I am. And I bring that up because the three opponents in New York State that we had, I don't think that we should get rid of the church, Catholic or Jewish. I don't think we should get rid of the Boy Scouts. We just need to address these problems. We need to address these problems. In institutions where there is systemic cover-up, where there's more of a process of moving the abuser to hushing the victim than to addressing the problem, we need to address that. We need to address that right now. But that does not mean that kids shouldn't be skating in Lake Placid at 15 below zero in February, nor parents standing on the ice watching it. It doesn't mean that kids shouldn't be on swim teams or gymnastics teams or that there shouldn't be camping trips with kids. I think those are all really important things. And my experience trying to pass this law really made me see so many sides of it, because there are so many sides to this coin. So ultimately, in New York, we passed the Child Victims Act. And I'll just give you a quick rundown of what that actually is. Previously, a survivor of child sexual abuse had to come forward by age 23. That means that I had to come forward to the police by age 23, or to find a lawyer and to sue by age 23. What we did in New York was we pushed that civil statute out to 55. So people whose statute had not yet expired now have until 55, which you'll remember, the majority of people don't come forward until their 40s and 50s anyway. So it's more in alignment of what's realistic for both the survivor and then also for society, for the survivor to heal. The other piece is that we moved the criminal statute of limitations out to age 28. And then the third piece is this retroactive window that was such an opposition from all the institutions. And what it does is it allows people, again, like myself, whose opportunity to come forward and to, in the public space, right a wrong, in the public space to be heard, and most importantly, in my opinion, to be able to make a difference. And we have until August of 2021 in New York State to come forward to file these claims. Like I said, I initially came forward because of this little girl in Wisconsin, and I realized that that's just the tipping point, that she motivated me to help kids all over New York and from coast to coast. I'm also happy to take questions along the way if that makes sense. So after we were successful in New York, I realized what's next, right? What do we do? And so from there, I created America Loves Kids, like I mentioned, and we went out to Arizona. Now, Arizona is very, very different from New York. And I will say that New York is its own beast. And I had the true belief that if I could pass a law, if I could learn the interworkings of Albany, then I could work in any state legislature. And it certainly helped to prepare me for Arizona, but Arizona is its own entity. So we went out to Arizona, where it was is a Republican governor, Republican House, and Republican Senate. We had opposition, don't get me wrong, a lot of opposition. In fact, the bill sponsor, Senator Paul Boyer and Senator Heather Carter, they in fact held up the entire budget of Arizona to do what was right for survivors and to pass this bill. The fight in Arizona was similar and different at the same time. It was the same idea of institutional opposition, but in Arizona, the legislators were much more upfront and in your face about they just didn't want it to pass. And it wasn't until, truthfully, until the Republican caucus had a meeting and they had a hot mic incident where they were talking about how they were going to discipline the bill sponsors, and someone realized, they were like, it's a hot mic. And so the whole conversation was taped. That is what tipped them to have to do the right thing, right? So in Arizona, we were able to pass a law also that opens up a window through the end of this year. And hopefully more people will come forward in Arizona. After we pass a bill, people always say, well, then what? What happens? And in Arizona, we did a tour all over the state, alerting people to the new legislation. And one of the most moving parts of that tour for me was speaking in Flagstaff, Arizona. Absolutely gorgeous place. Speaking in Flagstaff, where it came up that survivors have the ability and the capacity to not hate their abuser. And one of the panelists that was there, he was the school counselor for the school, so he did not know the 30, 50, 60 people in the audience, but they certainly all knew who he was. And, I said this, that not everyone is going to hate their abuser, and this reaction that we get so much of like, oh, I want to end their life, I want to make it miserable. Not everyone has that vindictive way. And with this survivor, this counselor on the other end of the panel, mind you, it's a senator, two senators were there, this school counselor, another school principal. I mean, this guy's community was there. And I looked over and I could see he had something to say. His lip was shaking a bit, and he said, "I've never heard someone not articulate their child sexual abuse solely around hate." And he's like, "I don't hate my uncle, but I feel like I've always was supposed to. I've never told anyone this, but my uncle did this to me too." I mean, just think about it. Like, think about the gravity of that situation. This man is in his community. Everyone's going to see him. Everyone knows. But the idea of just bringing people together and having a conversation around such a hard topic did allow people to share, again, like I've said a few times, share some of their worst days and worst nightmares. What's next? Everyone always wants to know what's next. I would say it's two-pronged. One, it's people have a hard time finding representation when a bill is passed. And what I mean by that is I personally had never had any experience in the legal world. I'd never sued anyone or been sued. I had neither of my parents are lawyers. Like, I had very little access to that. And so I really did not know how to navigate that space. And it took a long time. It took a long time for me to figure out who was in it for the right reasons. It took a long time for me to learn the ethics and rules that one is actually supposed to abide by in the legal field. And so one of the things at America Loves Kids, what we're doing is helping people who think they want to come forward, they think they want to tell their story, but you just don't know how or who to go to or what that process is. So a lot of my time, especially with the New York window, is helping people to find lawyers that they will be as comfortable as possible talking to, because it's invariably a very hard conversation and process, as well as working with survivors along the way and letting them know what is, quote, normal in the legal process. From my skating days, I've had over 10 orthopedic surgeries. So if I'm going to have a surgery tomorrow. In fact, I overslept one of my surgeries once, and the orthopedist is like, "No one does that. Everyone is awake all night nervous." And I'm like, "Well, I've done it before, you know?" So if you want to do that kind of thing, I can help you. I can walk you through that. But the legal process, not so much. And I realized that while a doctor might say to me, "This surgery is not that bad. It won't hurt much," I have said to the doctor, "How many times have you had it done?" To which they, of course, say never. Same thing on the legal side. The lawyers assume that I know all these processes, and I've just tried to really break it down along the way so that when another survivor comes in, I can help them in that process. I can help them in what's involved in going through your memories and things like that to put a complaint together. What do you need to do? What's normal? What are the normal time frames? Learning that it's not like SVU and that it's not like TV where it happens fast and it's glorious and exciting. So that's been a big process and big part of the focus of America Loves Kids, as well as looking at what state's next. We have our eyes on a few states across the country that have poor statute of limitation laws that are much more friendly to protecting the perpetrator rather than helping the victim and the community heal. One state that's super important to me that we hope to be successful in is Pennsylvania. And the reason for that is, you might recall the Attorney General's report that looked into dioceses all across PA. And Attorney General Josh Shapiro is truly one of my personal heroes and one of the heroes of the fight to end child sexual abuse in this country because of his report. because he refused to be pushed away, and that he was able to go in and get documents and expose the systematic and just the years of abuse within the Catholic Church across Pennsylvania. New York benefited from the work of Attorney General Josh Shapiro, but Pennsylvanians haven't yet. And so we're really looking at how to be successful there so that the people that did so much hard work are able to benefit from that. Maybe, do you want to take a question or two? I'm going to have some coffee. Oh, this is my favorite one. Do you still skate? No, I don't. I don't because I lived in the city for a while where it's harder to get to ice rinks. I just moved more upstate to the Catskill Mountains with my boyfriend, and I'm a lot closer to ice rinks. So I hope to be skating again more. I don't skate not because I don't want to. I feel like a lot of athletes, swimmers or something, say like, I never want to be in a pool again. I never want to be in water again, where to me, there's nothing better than being back on ice. So hopefully now that I'm more upstate, I'll be able to skate more. And whomever asked that, if you're a skater and you see me, please say hi. So was I able to find help or go to someone after the abuse? Yeah, so I was 15. I was in the summer between 9th and 10th grade. I was 15. I didn't have my license. I had asked my parents if I could go to a movie, right? Like I was a kid. When the abuse happened, like I said, it was for months and months. I told no one. When Andy Gable retired from speed skating after going to the 1998 Nagano Olympics, he went on to leadership positions within our sport, and I continued to skate in the sport and move up. Ultimately, like I said, he was the president of U.S. Speed Skating, so I didn't tell anyone. I really think to this day that I put my pain and suffering into training for skating. I think that's evident in the surgeries that I've racked up. Even to this day, my way of dealing with something is to go for a long run. And is that smart with my knees? Probably not, but that was my outlet. So no, I really didn't go to anyone during, certainly, and in the decade after the abuse. But I think that's different now. One, I think with the access to, for kids to be online, they have access to reaching out to people in multiple ways. I also just think that the way people talk about it is so different. I mean, I can remember going out to dinner with my friends in New York City, say, 6 years ago. And if someone asked me what I'm doing and what I'm working on, and I said, trying to pass a law to help survivors of child sexual abuse, the whole table was kind of just like, what? So I more or less just avoid it. I was in social advocacy, if you will. Where today, if you say, this is what I'm working on, people are like, I'm sorry you have to, but that's great. That happened to this person I know or that person I know. So I really think that the dialogue around it has changed so much. And I truly have found that no matter who I talk to, they have some sort of connection to this crime that's happened to so many people. I mean, maybe that's because if they say no, they've then met me and now they have met someone. But the point that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys, I mean, think of if that were the statistics of milk being sour at school, they'd pull it. Of course they'd pull it. I mean, if it were 1 in 10 kids is going to get sour milk, they'd pull it. They have a 1 in 100, right? And so how come time after time, year after year in this country, we just talk about trying to reduce it when we could just end child sexual abuse? It's a human-made problem, and I think that humans, in fact, can help to end it. God, these are such great questions. So these questions are an example of how different the world is, and different specifically it is here in Albany, Smallbany, Saratoga, where everyone knows each other. First off, anyone who wants to get involved, we're building an army of people that are motivated truly to end this problem. And anyone that wants to join, the last slide is my email, but bridie@americaloveskids.org, or through our website. And I have a weird name and a weird sport. I'm very easy to Google. But seriously, just drop me a line. Someone will get back to you. And there's lots of ways to get involved. The other thing I say to people is getting involved, especially if you are a survivor, does not by any stretch of the imagination mean standing up at a microphone in front of a camera. In fact, I would maybe suggest not to do it. It's hard. It's hard, and you don't know who's on the other side, who's watching it, who's going to call you later. That effect, it's empowering, but it's hard. Speaking up, first, and I truly mean this, first means with yourself. And I remember the day, and I have it written in a journal, that I wrote it down for the first time of like, this happened to me, I'm upset about it, how do I deal with it? And so speaking up and getting involved, in my opinion, if you're a survivor, is to first acknowledge it to yourself. And it's a hard thing to admit because you've lost some agency. Outside of that, of getting involved, I think the way these things are going to change is the micro effects. And I mean, I guess that's my story, right? I spoke up to help the small community of speed skating, and I threw one rock into a lake, and the ripples are just still going. Right now, one of my colleagues, I called him when we had first started working together. I called him, and he's talking to me on the phone, and I hear a young kid's voice say, "Dad, who are you talking to?" And he goes, "It's the sexually abused speed skater. Remember I told you?" And I said, "Oh my God, did you say that's your kid? Like, how old is your kid, 12? And he's like, "Bridie, this is how it's going to change. This is how it's going to change." And so how can we get involved? How can we each get involved? It's making those micro changes and those micro interactions. And I'll tell you, as someone who might be the recipient of hearing it, I'd say the hardest people to talk to are the people that are closest to me. I mean, I'd rather speak to 5,000 people in an auditorium where I don't know anyone versus sitting down and having to have a heart-to-heart with someone in my family or a close friend, just because it's so hard, it's so personal. And so recognizing that coming forward and talking about this it's tricky, it's hard, but I will say that as soon as you do come forward, there's just a bit of putting it out there and letting people know that it's real, I think is really, really helpful. There are a lot of different kinds of support groups. There are Again, if you email me, I can tell you where they are specifically in your area, though now with COVID, everything is online and you can join groups anywhere. We're seeing a lot of people coming forward during this pandemic and reaching out and saying, hey, this happened to me, what do I do? I've been thinking about coming forward and filing a case, but I just never had the time. But with COVID, people are just kind of like stuck in their thoughts and going through and thinking. As well as they can call and talk and not be worried about the person in the cube next door. So if you're any of those people, I'd suggest you to try and take that step forward. And again, anyone that was abused in Boy Scouts, the Boy Scouts of America declared bankruptcy, which means all their assets are being pooled into one, and any Boy Scout that was abused has to file a claim by November 16th at 5 p.m. That's it. All the claims come in, and then from there, it moves forward. If you come forward the next day, it's too late. If we are successful and we pass a law in Pennsylvania, Boy Scouts can't utilize that. If you were abused in Boy Scouts and you come forward to use the Child Victims Act in December, you can't. And so I've just been trying to share this message as much as possible to let people know that it's their chance to come forward and to speak. And I also, for all the naysayers and the people that write the terrible comments at me, it's not about going after the Boy Scouts, and it's certainly not about going after speed skating, but because there is so much good in those activities, that let's address the bad parts, let's address the bad problems, and then move on and keep it good. So I understand that you would be scared to speak up, but there's a lot of ways to do it that's safe. A lot of ways to do it that can and should be at your own pace. And then, what effect has my work done in the sports world? It's really an interesting question, because in my opinion, not much. And that makes me really upset and scared. If Bridie Farrell came forward at 31, having already had a relatively successful skating career and gone to school and had a job, all those things. I came forward and nothing happened. How would someone that's on the team today ever be able to come forward and fear rocking the boat? But I get that things take time, and the collection of every athlete coming forward and speaking up is what's going to make the difference. So are sports where I want them to be? Not yet, but I will not stop trying to help make sports safer, because I believe in sports and the value of sports so much. All right. So the question is, how did you start looking for help in your cause? Truthfully, I walked into that rink in Milwaukee. I saw the banners with my abuser's name on them. I saw everything was the same, and I thought, I've got nothing to lose. And I met that little girl and I told my story online, on National Public Radio. In hindsight, I would encourage someone to think it through a little more. And the rawness and the authenticity is quite obvious in the interview, but it wasn't a question for me when I came forward, because I had been to such dark places and had so much pain that I was willing, no matter what the world of speed skating was going to throw at me, it wouldn't be worse than the pain that I had felt in my own bones. And so I'd take all those bullets if it protects that next kid. And that's why I came forward. And this is actually a great question to end on is, how do I keep telling my story when it's hard and when it's, it's a mixing up trauma again and again from years past. And I really appreciate that question, because to everyone out there who has been through something like this, you didn't ask for it to happen to you, and by no means are you responsible to society, to me, to the little girl, to anyone to come forward and be such a public advocate like this. There's tons of ways to be supportive that aren't so out front. But I'll tell you, I tell my story time and time again because I really had some dark days, and I'm really glad and thankful that I didn't act on any of them. And I've learned to truly appreciate smaller things. And I will say to my boyfriend some days, like, I'm really glad I'm alive. Like, who says that, right? And so I know that telling my story helps other people. I also have found that telling it doesn't cause as much pain as I've seen in yesteryears. The other thing is it's kind of empowering, and it's kind of to sit across from these people that have been trying to silence, not to be repetitive, trying to silence 25% of girls, women, 17% of men. Like, no, that's done. That's done. And it's time for the narrative to shift and the power to shift, and to build a community that supports each other about the trauma we went through, bad as it was, that it is not what defines us, but we can move forward and do a lot with it. So again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. With the questions, I feel like much closer to you all. And I'll be honest, it's harder to speak here at HVCC than it is for me to speak in the city, in Manhattan or in Denver or something like that. And anyone out there that thinks that this happened to them, you don't need someone's approval that it did. Like, you recognize it for yourself and see what's the best way for you to deal with it. Anyone that wants to get involved, or if I can help direct you to resources in any way, please do reach out. And ultimately, that if we keep working together, we can weed out these bad apples wherever they are and address them however we can, but that we can still keep speed skating or swimming or school sports or orchestra or whatever it is alive, because it brings so much to our community. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. I hope to see you all on social media, and do reach out if I can do anything.